Hello and welcome to week 6 of Race and Ethnicity. This is a pretty die-hard chapter. It really gets deep. Again, I love your book. Your book is a little bit deep, and at first it looks a little bit wordy, but once you start to read it, it's just incredible. A little bit of a higher level book, in my opinion, which honestly is great because it really challenges you and it makes you think about a ton of stuff, and it really gets into the systemic racism and the institutional structures of the United States. It's just absolutely fascinating. So I hope you guys enjoy that book as much as I. So again, you guys are in week 6. This week, you guys are going to have 2 assignments. You're going to have your inquisitive over chapter 3. Again, I love that book. If you guys care about learning, please read the entire chapter, every single word of every part of your book, because it's so good. So do the inquisitive. You'll log into the Norton site and take care of that. And then again, this week, you guys have this dog whistle politics assignment. So when you guys click on this, you have a great TED Talk here. That goes over dog whistle politics. And then you also have the book on dog whistle politics, so you guys will want to open this. It's about 30 to 35 pages. Really, you could read the entire thing in an hour. So just get a cup of coffee, sit on your couch, read the book, and it really is very inspirational. And it starts to talk about the subtle ways that you can use race in for political purposes, for example. And this can be done in pro ways or in negative ways, depending on the groups that you're trying to appeal to. So dog whistle politics is very interesting. And then for this, you guys are going to end up writing a 700-word paper, which is right down here. You guys are going to watch the video, read the book, then you're going to write a 700-word paper relating things that you guys have seen in the media in modern times to the points that he's talking about right now. So what are you seeing during the Trump campaign that are subtle messages toward different racial groups? And obviously you have a whole surplus of information to go over there, okay? When we have the book, the PowerPoints are also loaded, so these are good to look through, and they also have some fun review questions. But guys, look through some of these lecture slides because this has just really good stuff from the book and it breaks it down from you. So you can just download it and play it from the start. And as you start looking through it, it starts talking about, the whole history of the racial movements in politics. What did it take for the civil rights movement to come about? Usually I have my classes watch a little bit of Eyes on the Prize, which is a great civil rights movie, but it's very sad because it begins with the murder of Emmett Till. And Emmett Till was a young African-American child who had gone to the South to stay with his family. And while he was there, he happened to supposedly look or speak to a white woman. And 2 men came and took him and murdered him, and his body was found in the river. And they had an open casket. They brought his body back to Chicago. Thousands upon thousands of people came and saw his open casket. Then they put the picture of Emmett Till in the open casket in Life magazine in the 1950s, which was huge. But it begins the entire civil rights movement. It begins the bus boycotts, which leads into the Martin Luther King's March on Washington. It's a whole long process. And then, when Kennedy was shot, you also got to think, what did it take for the civil rights movement to get passed? And that's when Lyndon Johnson came in, a Texas Southerner who originally had voted against civil rights, upends his old decision, calls all the Southern senators and said, you're going to vote for this, because his goal was to achieve what Kennedy had set out to do. And, really, we have a Texas Southerner, of all people, to thank for the civil rights movement getting through, okay? But this idea of social movements when it comes to race and ethnicity is very deep, because you have the whole workers' rights movement, you have the movements of the farm workers in California that is involving a lot of people from Latin America, along with other races involved in that. You have the Native American movement, so again, you have the Irish taking power in the early 1900s. There's so many examples. The women's feminist movement going on right now. Black Lives Matter going on right now, which has been going on for hundreds of years, of course, okay? So you have all these multi-level civil rights movements going on constantly and have been going on for a long time because, again, we live in a hierarchically stratified social system that's full of inequality in which white males of European descent had controlled for a long time. But as we've been discussing in this class, why was race created in the first place? And then again, we go back to the TED Talk video and realize that race categories are not accurate regarding biological differences between people, okay? If you're white in America, guys, you have more in common with someone in Africa genetically than you do your next door neighbor who also thinks they're white, okay? White is just an ethnicity. It's a grouping of people that span the entire continent from Russia to Europe to North America. It's just ridiculous, okay? So, rethinking the idea of am I actually white Again, do you have any Native American in your blood? Because then no, you're not white anymore. You're mestizo. So it's just we got to be thinking about race and how it really is an economic category. Okay, we created race so that we could have very clearly defined lower classes. When the American revolutionaries, the middle class, overthrew the upper class, the European powers like Britain and Spain, they then took over the society and continued to deny women and non-whites power. Okay, it was written into the Constitution. So really, you just had a social class movement where the middle class white landowners took over and then made sure to subjugate everybody else in the process. And so we've been having to undo what our founding fathers did, hundreds of years ago by making society a little bit more equitable where meritocracy might actually matter. Okay, so this idea of civil rights movement and social movements in general, if you guys get a chance to take a social movements class, it's a awesome junior, senior year, upper level elective. Wonderful. Try to take that, okay? So this goes through the civil rights movement. It goes through voting patterns and Jim Crow laws and all the ways that we made sure that people couldn't vote so that white males could maintain power. So it goes really deep into all of that, okay? It talks about all the different taxes and literary tests and the terrorist approaches that white people have used to subjugate other people and make sure they couldn't vote to gain rights, for example. Examples of literacy tests. Talks about the NAACP and all these other groups that have come together because, again, more power and more groups can then sway political influence. So the NAACP, the SCLC, SNCC. So it goes deep. It talks about the bus boycotts and the sit-ins that resulted after the murder of Emmett Till, the freedom rides of 1961 with the bus boycotts. It talks about how other people fought against them, and then so you watch the videos of white people fighting against people, protesting for racial rights. And again, so you've had a lot of suppression, this whole time that people have done what they could to make sure other people couldn't gain power. But was that really fair? No, but that's the history of America, okay? So again, your book gets deep into all of this, talks about the church bombings after the civil rights and all the ways that white people, in the South, for example, tried to fight against civil rights and how they discriminated in voting. I mean, guys, it just goes deep. So then in the Native Americans and, the question of whether genocide was committed and then us taking their land over hundreds of years. And then you have this whole policy. So again, whatever group you're interested in studying, this book is covering it, and we're covering this class. Cesar Chavez is, the first one of the Latin Americans to really come forward. Gets into the backlash. Again, there's a lot to it. Look through this whole thing. It goes on forever. It's very deep. And then on the bottom of all this, you have all your review questions if you guys want to go over those. But so again, you guys are studying some pretty dynamic aspects of society. Not a lot of it's pretty. Some of our history is pretty dark. So, just to get you guys thinking about that stuff. But so that's what's due this week. Do your assignment on dog whistle politics. Write a 700 words paper. And then knock out your quiz for Chapter 3 after you guys read and study that book because it's so good. All right, have a great week, y'all. Thanks so much.